visual layered ways. Her work has been exhibited in art galleries, festivals, museums internationally, including the National Portrait Gallery, the Smithsonian American Art Museum in Washington, D.C., the Frist Center of Visual Arts in Nashville, the Orange County Museum of Art, the Seoul Metropolitan Museum of Art, the Netherlands Institute for Media Art, the list goes on, the Taipei Museum of Contemporary Art, and the Center for Contemporary Art in Kyiv, Ukraine. Awards and honors include a MacArthur Foundation Fellowship, a Transmedial International Media Art Festival Award, a Rockefeller Foundation New Media Fellowship, and a commission from the Whitney Museum for the Code Doc project on their art web. It doesn't look like that, Code Doc. Project on their art port website. She also holds a patent for a video tracking system she developed while working as a research fellow at New York University. Recent public commissions include works for Liberty Mutual Group, the Foresight Foundation, the Sacramento Airport, and the City of San Jose. She's currently an assistant professor. It could be associate. This is an older bio. Associate professor of art practice in the Department of Art and Art History, and by courtesy of the computer science in the Department of Engineering at Stanford University. And she is represented by Haynes Gallery in San Francisco. We will hold questions until the end, and then if you hold your questions, we have a mic, and we'll get them to you. We are streaming this on YouTube Live, too, so that people in the audience can virtually can hear the questions. Please welcome Camille Utterback.
Thank you so much. I think we need to turn on the projector. All right, thank you. Technology. Thanks everyone for coming tonight, and thank you so much for the ranch for supporting artists in this communal and nurturing way. As Andrea said, I'm a full-time professor, and anyone who is a teacher or a student or the family of anyone who is studying knows these haven't been the easiest couple years. So. For some people, the constraints of the pandemic created new forms of creativity or allowed new forms of creativity. I did not find that to be the case at all. So I'm really enjoying finally feeling like I'm having time and energy to work again, including being here as the visiting artist. So it's super luxurious. And thanks again to everyone who makes that possible. So I'm going to focus on some threads in my work that I think relate to what I'm hoping to do in my 2 weeks here. But just as a little background, I know I was speaking with one of the interns at dinner last night who asked, when I got interested in computers. And it was definitely not for the early part of my life as an artist. I really avoided them assiduously for a long time. I just didn't think they had much to offer. So I do have a background in more traditional media, but it was in the maybe late 90s. I actually thought I was sort of turning away from being an artist. I felt I wanted to be more engaged in issues that were happening culturally at the time, and I felt really marginalized as an artist. I think I was in the wrong place and maybe making the wrong kind of work also, but I started learning programming because I thought, I saw these things called CD-ROMs, which some of you might be old enough to remember, and I realized, this is a space you could add images and sounds and create ways for people to engage with all these different types of media together. And I really liked the idea that you could make sort of little ecosystems of media in different ways. And so hopefully you'll see some of that thread through my work. I really see what I do as I write software, so I write a set of rules that creates these ecosystems that a big important part of the ecosystem are the people that are in the space with the work. So I will start with a piece. This is a collaboration with Romy Ashativ. We were both grad students at NYU when we created this. The piece is called TextStream. And I think this kind of interaction, which I'll show a quick video of in a second, where there's a camera looking at you in the space and there's digitally generated elements that react to your body in some way. A lot of folks are familiar with this now, like through things like Snapchat and all different kind of filters on our phones. But this was 1999. So when we first showed this, some people didn't even understand, like, how are you getting my image onto the screen, right? Because we just weren't, if you think back, those of you who are old enough to remember this, we didn't carry around video cameras with us all the time. So Romy and I were really interested in thinking about how do we create systems that react to our bodies in ways at a time when all we really had were mice and keyboards to do that. So let me show a quick video. Oops. Let's see if it will start. And this is, again, from 1999, so the quality of this video is very low definition. Apologies in advance, and the sound starts in a second. Oh, I think there should be audio at this point.
Their bodies to do what seems magical, to lift and play with falling letters that do not really exist. Like rain or snow, the colored text appears to land on participants' heads and arms. The text responds to the participants' motions and can be caught, lifted, and then let fall again. The falling text will land on anything darker than a certain threshold and fall whenever that obstacle is removed. If a participant accumulates enough letters along their outstretched arms or along the silhouette of any dark object, they can sometimes catch a word or even a phrase. The falling letters are not random, but form lines of a poem about bodies and language.
So I'm not sure what was happening with the sound. That didn't happen when we tested. So the low res is part of it, but not the crunchy audio. I do apologize for that. So synonyms for limbs, loosening of syntax is one of the lines in the poem that I like. And some people reacted when the kid flipped the umbrella upside down. And that moment of someone in these installations asking, like, what happens if I do that? Like, I think I understand the rules that the letters are landing on things, so I'm going to try something and see what happens, is part of what got me really hooked into continuing to do this type of work for a long time. I really like creating a situation where people ask questions and can test it out for themselves and see what happens. So I did a number of works where you saw yourself in a much more literal way, but I'm going to talk about the pieces that are more painterly and sort of gestural, which is what I'm most interested in doing now. So this is a piece, goodness, I think this was 2001, so I didn't put that in my notes. 2003. I started this series in 2001, and in these I put the camera up on the ceiling, so I got kind of tired of looking at people in this mirror-like way and was more interested in a bird's eye view of how people moved around in a space, and you can see the lit area on the floor is where the camera is looking. So everything that is generated in these abstractions is based on how people are moving in the space. And I here was trying to get back to kind of more painterly mark making, which is sort of hard with computers, especially at that time, and especially with my skill set, which was still evolving. It's easy to make a definition of like draw a line from here to there on this pixel grid, which is what a computer screen is. It's like a piece of graph paper. But it was hard to get texture, so I was trying to do that by just layering up lots of lines. And then in some of the later pieces in this series, which I'll show a video of one of these in a second too, I felt like I had this aha moment where I started scanning in marks that I had drawn, so little blobs of ink or even little mini sketches, that those were then part of what was reacting to how people were moving. So it gave me a way to start layering more hand-drawn imagery with this computational processes that I was creating. This was a show at the Milwaukee Art Museum called Act React, and it was very exciting for me because I have a pretty big studio, but there's no way I can even set up like this kind of situation. And so for me to be able to see how people were reacting differently in the different pieces really solidified some of what I had suspected, which is, again, the rules you create allow for different possibilities, and then we mold ourselves to sort of respond to those. So I think of this is important in terms of all our technology. Like if you think of people's posture around our phones now, and like how this piece of technology literally shapes our bodies. If you watch how people use their bodies now, like we're always slumped over our phones or like not making eye contact with each other. But depending on the rules, like whether the pieces were sort of reacting to stillness or did different things when you acted more agitated, people tune themselves to those systems. So that's something I'm still really thinking about. And I had a chance to see in that. So I'll show, again, this is an older piece, so also still a little bit older video, but bear with me. And hopefully the goal in the audio here was to explain these different sets of rules. So in each piece, I was also trying, I try to craft those different behaviors to build up to a composition. Can we turn up the audio a little?
The goal of these works is to create an aesthetic system
More?
which responds fluidly and intriguingly to physical movement in the exhibit space. In these dynamic works, the positions, velocity, and existence of various parts of a projected image depend on people's presence and movement. Some responses are direct and immediate. Other behaviors evolve over time based on the flow
Can you guys
of people
hear?
in the space.
Yeah, here, I'm going to stop for a second. Oops. Sure. Is something loose? We tested all this and I very specifically had excellent audio control earlier.
It was working just fine earlier. I'm gonna switch this out
Okay.
possibly and just see what's up. I'm not sure why. Oh, yeah, you can unplug that.
Love technology.
Sorry about this. All right. Hopefully this will.
I can talk over it if need be.
Well, I mean, I'm just like shrinking it.
Yeah, and it's up on my end here too. So I didn't.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't. Let's double check, but yeah, it's really up.
Okay. Let's try it.
Okay.
I'll take it back to the booth.
Okay. Thank you. So I'll show you how this piece developed also as the next part of the talk. But as this series sort of proceeded of these drawing systems, I think I got better and better at thinking about how do I write a rule that has a graphic element. So it's doing something visually in the piece, but it's also doing something in terms of the interactive system, in terms of that ecosystem that I've set up. So how do you locate yourself in this abstraction, right? In the texturing piece, it was really easy because you could literally see yourself. In these pieces, it's weird because the camera's on the ceiling. So I'm trying to build in elements where you can be like, hey, that's my arm, but what's going on? Maybe the camera's up there, something that kind of lets you locate yourself, and then other layers of behaviors that maybe, you can see some part of your influence, but they're not so obvious, right? Because for me, I'm trying to create that balance of if the rules are super obvious, the piece may get boring, right? Texturing, I think we kind of lucked out that as a first piece that rule is really quite simple. You're just catching the letters. The rule in the software is just that the letters have to land on anything that's dark in that incoming video image. So I don't even know that there are people there, really. There's much more sophisticated camera tracking now that knows where your fingers are or your nose or things like that. That was not at all the case in that piece. But maybe because the rule was sort of open-ended enough and we're intrigued by the idea of things falling. There's other associations with that. And maybe because the rule, because I didn't know where your hands were, this allowed the kid to catch the text in the umbrella. So in a way, the simplicity of that rule had a kind of richness to it. But sometimes you may have seen these interactive pieces in airports and stuff now where this is like a one-liner, right? It's not that interesting. Should I try again? Are we good to go? Or? Oh, okay, sorry, I was stalling there. Okay, let's try again. So this is talking about these layering of multiple rules instead of just one. I think it should, there's audio. Okay, maybe I'll just, as we keep trying. So this was, I was starting, the meshy stuff was helping you find where you are, so that's directly tracking to your body. And then you leave a trajectory which gets populated by these other little marks that then the next time someone comes... Anyway, the important moment there is that you can push the marks off the trajectory where they're laid down. So what starts happening here is an intersection of multiple moments in the space. So it's not just like an Etch-a-Sketch where someone's drawing, but that you are adding material into the composition by your movements. And then this kind of network of dots is if you stand still, something happens. So I wanted to think about how do you react to stillness, not just movement. Again, a lot of our technology is like press a button, twitch, twitch, twitch. So what happens when you create different possibilities there? So I hope that again, it's a sort of space people can explore in different ways. People get very excited when you react to them too. So, but that, you know, so there's a momentum from pushing the marks from where they got laid down to a new place. They always are trying to go back to the last place they were. So it really is a way to connect. You know, I think we think about like time-lapse photography, even painting has sense of layering of time. But because each of these marks, I can store information with them, kind of like if you think of slots in your cell phone where you put people's addresses, that's kind of what I'm doing behind the scenes here, is that when a mark gets laid down by someone walking through, it knows where it started. And so if you push it out of the way, it's always trying to go back to that, which is what makes these sort of swaths of color. All right, I'm going to keep going, hopefully. There's one more video with the audio, but I'll keep talking. No, it's okay. I'm happy. I know, it's really weird. Anyone cut the cable during dinner?
Yeah, right.
The mice? So I wanted to show, because you're all makers who are here, people that are interested in making things, I wanted to show a little bit of behind the scenes of this, because I think it's not, you know, most people have some sense of how a brush works or a pencil works, or even a camera. But I'm going to walk you through a little bit of the code behind this. So this is a still from the finished piece that you were just watching the video of. It started out like this. So I had a camera in my studio, and I was wanted to see how someone walking across the space could push lines and sort of warp lines. So in this, they started out as kind of squiggly lines, and then I walked across. I don't know how clear it is to see, but my movement kind of walking across the space pushed the points in those lines. This is just, I've changed the parameters so it happened more. I started, this is when I started figuring out how to load in textures or load in other drawn marks into this. So I was attaching the blue pieces to the little lines. And then I replaced everything with these Sharpie marks. So instead of the black lines, they're Sharpie marks, segmented lines. And then I realized, oh, they don't have to be redrawn again every frame, which is how a computer draws, is frame by frame. I can sort of keep the background. This is super obvious to painters, but like I think because I was in a kind of video metaphor, and in a computer, when you're making an animation, you're sort of saying what to do every frame. Of the video, this idea of having a visual history took a little while to happen here. I was playing around with that. This was figuring out how to make the trajectory, so I felt like these were getting kind of too, it was all like a uniform space, and so I wanted you to be able to see a little more how you're moving through it, so this was trying to make a line that followed me around. Then combining the red is now the line that followed me around with the white things are what I was pushing away. And this was the aha moment where I have this, I forgot. You know, this was me walking across with all the little green, each dot is like a moment in time. And then I realized I could, when I walked across this way, perpendicularly push that out. So the gray is me, the second swipe through pushing out that line, if that makes any sense. So that was like this, the things that are happening in one moment can kind of change what was already part of the composition, which is definitely something that's harder to do in other media. I don't remember. Adding different textures. These were the kind of sprays of dots, trying to think about that element. I'm not sure that originally that reacted to stillness, but I liked what it looked like. So I was trying to find other visual forms, and then sort of adding more things together. Playing with, once I realized that I was gonna have the marks leave traces, what the marks were mattered in a couple different ways, not just their initial, what they look like, but how they kind of laid down tracks in the space. And then playing around with more colors. And I think these are from the finished piece, are very, very close to it. So hopefully that gives you some idea of this composing, like how would you make a set of rules to create a piece like this. And people, I don't know if this is as true, oops, there's one more. I don't know if this is as true anymore, but a question I got tons and tons early on was like, well, how can you have something like the artist's hand in digital media? Like it feels so removed, and it's so kind of cold and abstract to write these rules that you're talking about, which are text fundamentally. I'm like writing software code to do this. And I found this sketch that fell out of a notebook that was like one of the last things I had been sketching before going to grad school, so probably 4 or 5 or even 6 years before making this piece. And it really freaked me out. I was like, whoa, it's sort of this latent idea that I had. And it took me that long to build up the skills with the technology to kind of let that come out. So that definitively answered the question for me. There's another image from the early sort of sketching that I was doing. So not all my pieces are interactive. This is a piece called Floating World, where I was just scanning in a lot of different watercolor marks and then animating those so they move and change with time in, again, a procedural way. So it's not a fixed video. Everything is just sort of moving on these different cycles. I'm not going to show a video. It's on my website if you're interested, but this connects to some of the questions I'm asking now about, again, where is the intersection between these kind of hand-drawn analog mark-making processes and procedural processes? It's actually still up it's a permanent piece at Mercedes House, which is I think it's on 54th Street on the west side of Manhattan. It was really fun. So being able to think about, when you have a commission where someone wants to buy all these screens, it really allowed me to start thinking about those images not always fitting in a kind of standard projection shape also. So that opportunities like that were really important to me as an artist, including this one, which was a very temporary commission for the San Jose City Hall, projecting onto the whole facade of the City Hall. The camera was up, sort of right there, looking at the whole plaza. So I was thinking about how groups could form. And I know Lisa was talking last night, or in her talk, about these public commissions and like how long they take and the complexities of that. I was really bummed out. I really wanted to put a scrim on those sort of metal pieces that are there. It would have been really easy to clamp it on, but that would have created a precedent for hanging banners on the City Hall, so I wasn't allowed to do it. But it actually led to this. So I didn't like originally this idea that the image would be so broken up and half on the glass and half on the metal. But it really, once I did it, I was like, oh, wait a minute, this really is interesting. Like, not thinking of the projection as a flat surface, but something that reacts to the materials that it's on. And so I wanted to show that because that's an idea that is still floating around and has manifested in lots of ways since. So, sometimes those accidents that you are unhappy about turn out to be moments of discovery. And another one, I just wanted to show this too because those questions came up about longer-term public commissions or, this process of proposing something and getting rejected. So I get rejected all the time, over and over and over again, which is something I try to reinforce for my students. I think it's one of our core strengths as artists is like bouncing back from that if you're doing this kind of work where you're doing a lot of proposals. So this was I got invited to do this proposal for a corporate headquarters. They wanted a piece to be out on the sidewalk. They wanted something like a big LED screen that I thought would just ruin the traffic flow in this corner. It's a very busy corner. So I wanted something people could walk through, and I was really thinking about how can you use screens not to alienate people from each other, but to create a kind of reaction between people, but maybe strangers who didn't really want to talk to each other. So the idea was if you were standing on both sides of these transparent screens, it would change the animations. And these were screens, transparent screen. All LCD screens are transparent, but now I'm actually seeing these like in Whole Foods and stuff. They're on like the beverage doors, so there's animations that you can see through to the Coke, and be advertised to while you're picking your drink. But I thought there was this potential to create a double-sided kind of interaction. So this didn't happen. Here's one of the prototype screens. And I really like the idea also that the light shining through, so white is transparent. This is just a shadow of the screen on the ground, that the video animations would create animations, that were on the ground in the physical space. So again, a different way to think about screens, not taking us out of our physical space, but having a relationship to them that's a mutual relationship or an interesting relationship. But it didn't happen, but this idea comes back as well. So I wanted to share it as a part of my thinking around, how do we use these devices to create connections or create that layering in the physical space. So, but it did turn into, so I didn't get that. They hired another artist who did a really beautiful piece out there. And then they later came back to me and said, we really liked your work though. Could you create a proposal for this hallway that we have that's inside? Because they were worried about putting screens outside. And I knew at that point, too, from having all these conversations I'd had with them, it was an insurance company that they were very nervous about technology, even though they wanted it. So I had this idea of like, okay, what if I fabricate a whole bunch of glass that's going to last forever, and then we project on top of it. So we get the combination of the projection onto the glass and the richness of that. But so I wrote the contract so that if the projection fails or they don't want to maintain the animation part, they still have the glass. So that did the trick, and it got me this amazing opportunity to create a giant piece of glass. I worked with Franz Meyer of Munich, who are fantastic fabrication folks in Germany. Not all of the panels are interactive, so the three on this end are, and they're double layered. So this was also trying to think about how does this medium work in the daylight as well as in the dark. And I'll show a video of this too. But it's hard to photograph because we really see depth, which you can't capture in photographs. So when you're actually in the space, you see that some of the colored light is coming through all the glass and hitting the wall, and some of the colored light is on the glass on the front, which is a couple inches in front. And then, it's also legible in the day. There's sandblasting in the glass too. It's hard to see, but the sandblasting creates like really dark elements in the glass. So it's really, when I showed this the first time, there were a lot of friends at the opening who worked with technology, and they were like, what kind of screens are these? Like, what is it? And like they could, we get so used to what's around us that when you can come up with like what seems like it should be obvious, like you could figure it out. People thought it was something much more complicated than light hitting a couple layers of glass. So here's a quick video. Oh shoot, oh no, you know what? This only has music, so we don't actually need the audio. There's some catchy music that Michelle Higa Fox, who's an animator I worked with on this piece, who goes by Slanted Studio, made the video. So it's kind of better than mine, but it's just, you can read the titles, and imagine some nice music right now. Oh, and I forgot to say, so the cameras that are in here are also along the ceiling, so you can see how it's reacting to people. And in this situation, I'll let you read that. I had to think about how to make those rules sort of simple enough. Like, you don't want people in the hallway kind of backing up and backtracking. It's a very busy hallway at some times of day. So Slanted Studio is Michelle. So we wanted to develop behaviors that worked with this kind of linear flow of people through the hallway. So we developed this idea of sort of growth patterns and activating these sort of recordings of ink moving in different ways. So again, the really hybrid now of video, analog. And the tree, so the more people that walk by in the day, the more leaves the tree gets. And then eventually when it gets too full, they all fly away with enough people. Yeah, and that kind of stuff is really Michelle's expertise of like, how do you make a leaf look like it's unfurling? That's all her. Although we had a real argument. She was like, no, they don't need to work quite as beautifully as that. I was like, they do. And she admitted I was right. It's like anyone who collaborates, right? All right. So I'm going to show just a couple shots behind the scenes of this too. So how do you make something like this? This is in my studio. I can't fabricate the glass. I had to figure out how to do prototypes. You can see all kinds of small scale prototypes, and then painting on acetate on the double layers. You can see up in the left, like trying to figure out how am I going to do both layers of that and make sense of it. I think I could do better doing it again a second time, but it was a big learning curve of how it's very different, right, than software. You don't get an undo button once these get hung. So testing them on site with the acetate. You can wear high heel shoes if you're sea level on a construction site, but only if that's your role. Working with Franz Meyer, they're such experts, but every little piece of the drawings and acetates, we tested, like, what is the exact technique we're going to use, how are we going to do the sandblasting, what are all the different components, but really amazing to work with them. And then trying to also do the programming at the same time, like how, so this is the projection and camera setup in my studio to work on that. So here's the coming back of the idea of the looking through the glass panel. So I wasn't ever able to realize that piece, but I came up with a way to do it just on hanging scrim. So this is a piece called Entangled from 2015, I believe, that was originally shown at the Jewish Museum in San Francisco, but this is a solo show I had at the Stanford Art Gallery in 2017. So I really, again, wanted to have people think about, not just having a piece react to you. I think by this time, time has come by and we're so used to all our phones reacting to us, like everything is trying to get our attention, and it's very like solipsistic. It's all about you. Everything is about you. So I was trying to think, what would it be to have a shared space, like an actual shared space in these digital media? So one person on one side is creating some of the projection, but because there are these three sheer scrims, whatever someone on the other side is doing is blending with what's happening. So there's no way you can control the whole image unless you could be in two places at once. So I like that idea. And again, also, what do you gain by projecting onto this sheer fabric? It's really hard to translate in a photograph, but you see the depth of that light hitting on all the different levels. So it has a very, very different feeling than just a projection. You can kind of see what it looks like there. I also I had a really amazing opportunity. I got invited to do a residency at Pilchuck Glass School up near Seattle. So I got to work with some master glass makers, and I was trying to think in the glass too, how could I capture light to create shaped projection. So this is a piece called Light Filled, which is on the table in front of you. There's three little projectors projecting onto it, so kind of trying to create, again, something that you could also move around. So how are these screens activating our bodies instead of sort of constraining us or constricting us? So each blown glass piece has white elements in it that have shape, and the light is hitting them. And so it's basically the videos are just blacked out very painstakingly around the white chip. So all the light that isn't hitting a white piece of glass is black, so it kind of vanishes. Although lensing is really amazing with glass. Like the light was bending in all these strange ways, so it's sort of unpredictable sometimes what would happen. And I have there's no sound on this video, so this is just a video of a little bit of how that looks. So in the video was wildflowers at Pilchuck, so I kind of imagine this is like amber, like the video is somehow stuck in the glass, like the way a bug would get stuck in the glass. So something from the same place where these objects were made. I'm gonna, in the interest of time, not let this totally play. Here's, so Dante Marioni, if those of you who follow glass, was the glassmaker, and Mickey DeCosa, who helped me build those, and some other pieces, or they made them, but I designed, I said, here's what I'd like you to do. That's one of them coming out of the kiln, working on those. So again, really so beneficial for artists to have these opportunities, and thanks to all the people that make them possible. This was a more local residency in the Bay Area. I realized, okay, how could I do this myself? I'm not going to be able to always collaborate or learn how to make that kind of blown glass. I thought maybe I could handle kiln cast glass, so I was thinking about, could I create layers of glass where I'm using powder glass, firing them in the different layers, and then building them up. So each piece of glass has a bunch of layers in it that our eyes can see. Again, very different than our phones that don't have any texture or any richness to that glass surface. Working on these sort of bigger pieces. Sorry, I'm going a little fast. And then trying to put video behind. So this is really still a prototype. These were sort of in the years right before the pandemic. I was working on a possible big commission to do some bigger panels with animations behind that fell through kind of at the beginning of the pandemic. And I got really frustrated because I couldn't access a kiln during that time. So this is the end of the glass work that I was doing, was thinking about just how could you combine a screen behind these layers of glass in a way where I don't want to give up on the sort of generative animation, but I really love this richness. So I'll probably get back to that. But in the meantime, I've been starting to ask myself, like, how could I do this in a more lightweight fashion? So not with the kiln. And so what I'm working on here in the last little chunk of my time here is on something called a pen plotter, which I know some people know what this is. Golan Levin, who's a professor at Carnegie Mellon, taught a workshop here. I don't know if it was last session or the one before, but sometime this summer with a lot of these pen plotters. So they're kind of in fashion right now. I think a lot of people are interested in this idea of going back to the analog a little bit. So a pen plotter is a little robotic arm that you can make, with a set of software, move a pen around. Actually, let me play this while I'm talking about it. And this is how all printers used to be that weren't character-based, so not electric typewriter kind of printers, but early mechanical drawings or any sort of architectural drawings were done this way before we had laser printers or inkjet kind of printers. So you can see the arm is just moving X, Y, and kind of drawing. But you get all the same effects. Like sometimes the pen doesn't quite hit the paper right. Like this paper was a little warpy, you run out of ink. So you have a lot of the same sort of gestural properties of an actual pen on paper that is kind of lost in a fancy, like a really high quality digital print now. So I'm really interested in starting to think about this kind of gesture in combination with maybe my own hand. And I'm not sure what I'm going to do. So this is what I'm planning to work on while I'm here. I shot this afternoon, like about 4:30. Just got the pen plotter up and working with these different ink pens. And I might try to do something with machine learning or artificial intelligence. So I don't know if you've been paying attention to the news, but there's 3 platforms out there that are sort of have made incredible leaps in terms of just giving a text prompt to these systems, and then they've developed, they've been trained on sort of all the internet data of images that are out there. So you can say, give me a line drawing of a bunny rabbit eating spaghetti, in the style of Van Gogh, and it'll spit out something that looks pretty much like what you might imagine that to be. So I think there might be something in here, and I was in a little work group with some artists thinking about that right before coming here too. So, what is it if I have one of these AI systems, ask it to draw something, and then have the robot arm draw it in combination with me drawing somehow. So I'd like to try to get to that layering of different forms of drawing, hopefully to ask questions again about what is it that we do and how do we navigate this technology and ourselves in this moment. I guess I have 5 more minutes. I was supposed to speak for 45 and it's 7:40, so I will show this one other piece. Oh, whoops, I also have some pictures. These are some other, the paper matters, the brush matters, so these are just other tests. I've also been doing a little bit of printmaking, so that's the same image, the pen plotter drawing just the outlines of it, and a relief print that I made a lino print. So I think there's a lot of potential of combining like all these different techniques to see what each one gives. So I'm going to show one last piece that I think also starts to engage with this issue of sort of, I think people think technology is new, and it isn't, right? Technology is just the things that we're not sort of comfortable with yet in terms of devices that humans have invented. So this is a piece called Precarious, which was a commission for the National Portrait Gallery for a show called Blackout. Asma Naeem, who's a curator, called me, and she had seen some of my earlier work and said, I'd love you to be in this show about silhouettes. And I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. I'd love to be in the show, but I don't see the relationship with my work. She was inviting Kara Walker, and I was just like, I don't quite understand. And she said, well, through the software you're writing, you're extracting people's images, like you're cutting them out, basically, out of the incoming video. And I'm really interested in the sort of historic silhouette as an early kind of technology. And I was like, oh, that's actually super interesting. Here's the catalog. So these historic silhouettes were like all the rage in the era, sort of 1800s, right before photography was invented. So it was also a fairly democratic form of getting an image of yourself. Like most people, normal people, couldn't afford a portrait painter. But these were like very cheap, like 25 cents. You get 4 copies. So the cover of the catalog is from a book by one of the people that did this, William Bash from New Orleans. It has 1,846 silhouettes from people across all class, race, different social and ethnic backgrounds in New Orleans in the early 1800s. So Asma was also interested in this as a kind of portraits, in the National Portrait Gallery that of all kinds of people that we don't always have access to images of, which was interesting. So I want to show you. Here's how the physianotrace, which made those portraits, worked. Because to me, this is interesting as like an early technology, right? We kind of think technology is only close to us, but this is a physianotrace that made all those portraits on the catalog. You'd put your cheek on this thing, so your face was like kind of right here, and then this, someone would trace you with this, which is called a pantograph. So that's like this part would be tracing your head, like your profile, and then the little one up there would be making a little drawing of you up here on a piece of folded up paper, kind of like a snowflake, and then someone would take that and cut it out, so you get 4 copies of this silhouette, right? So I think that that's really cool. With every technology, there's also, this debate, I think, is coming more to the surface now about the biases of technology. So along with that history, which Asma talks a lot about in the catalog, it's also the beginning of racial profiling, right? Because there was this idea that the profile of your, silhouette said things about who you were as a person, and there was huge problems with that is present very, very much in all of our AI software too. So if you read anything about that, there's just horrific problems. I would recommend Ruha Benjamin's Race and Technology book if you're interested in delving into that a little bit more. But by anytime you're sort of trying to define things, we're creating categories, and there's all kinds of obviously issues with that. But this is the piece I developed for this show. I was interested in the idea. So sorry, one other thing that was a big theme in this show was also the idea of part of maybe why those silhouettes were such a rage at the time was Americans were trying to create a new image for themselves that was just sort of cut out or cut off from Europe in certain ways. So in a way, this kind of rigidity and separateness was important, perhaps, in why they were so popular. So I did this piece right after Trump was elected. So I was thinking of that idea of like, what is it to define yourself in relation or against something or someone else or some other nation? So that comes up in this piece. So I'm just, let's see if we can get the audio. You may not be able to hear the audio in this video either. I'll try to explain if we can't. We can't get it, okay. So I'll just show the video and talk over it again. But so I was thinking of this tracing as a way, again, to think about a shared space. So the line traces you if you stand still, but it never stops. So even though it's creating an outline of you, kids figure it out really quickly. It's always connected with someone else. It's in the space, and the outlines transform ultimately into these are like little ripped pieces of paper I scanned in. I don't know that you would figure that out, but the lines eventually turn into dots, eventually turn into these pieces that get pushed around. That connects all the way back to the Untitled 5 piece I showed you. But so your portrait, your outline is like always being deteriorated and becoming part of the general composition of the piece. I don't know if people see that or feel that in the piece, but that was something I was thinking about, of kind of like, what would it be to create a sort of tracing of a shared space, not a space of kind of self-definition or isolation. And this is the first piece I made that has a history beyond when it's running. So in like the Untitled 5 piece, if you turn it off and turn it on, it starts again. In this one, I was working with a really fantastic student, Raphael Palevsky-Smith, who helped me build a way to sort of archive whenever someone leaves the space. That's the only time we grab like a coherent silhouette, and that's stored. And so let's see if we get to that, please. So the negotiation, right? Like, so one thing I'll continue about the leaving silhouettes in a second, but this idea of like, how, you do have strangers who will start interacting with each other in these spaces, which I still really like. So how can you get people to engage with each other? Where's the part? So these gray pieces are the silhouettes when people leave. So when no one's in the space, it kind of reprints those, like almost as memory or something. So I really like that idea of the piece kind of having an even longer historical memory than just, so at the end of the show, it has everyone who's ever been in it and left in this very abstracted form. So that, there are some questions about ideas of surveillance and things like that, but we are all hopefully thinking a little bit more about that. So that is it. Thank you.
Camille, thank you so much. Do you have a question?
Hey, Camille. Welcome to Anderson Ranch. So great that you're here.
I can't see you all, by the way, so I'm like,
I'll just wave
if
and
I
be
act like I
interactive.
don't recognize that you asked a question, that's why I can sort of see you.
I was wondering if you could give us some sense of budgets. So the piece that wasn't selected